Hello, thank you for joining me. We're in a discussion about leadership, and we're on a journey to find out how to become the best leader that we can be. Today's topic is sharing the spotlight. Sharing the spotlight. I believe there are two parallel supporting roles of the ideal leader, and those roles are fathering and function. Let me say those roles again: fathering and function. Now, not every leadership role that we have will allow for both of those, and that's why I call them the ideal roles of a leader. In an ideal scenario, in order for you and I to be put in the best position to function ourselves and to help lead our company, our business, our church, whatever role or sphere we find ourselves in, both of these roles, fathering and functioning, really need to be in place for us. And we need to be given place to do both sides. Sometimes, however, it's not the case. Sometimes in certain organizations, you're put in a position and they're only wanting you to function and make sure that the function of the company or this section of the company is functioning well. And they're not necessarily looking for you to father people. What's the difference? Function has to do with the outcomes of the organization or the business. Functioning, if I'm in a business and I'm over sales, then the functional part of my leadership has to do with making sure that we're successful in our sales department. Fathering has to do with developing people. And the power of this role of leadership will cause the functional role to grow exponentially and become exponentially more successful. But it takes a lot longer to develop the fathering benefit from leadership than it does the functioning benefit of leadership. And it's no wonder then that businesses and some organizations choose to overlook the long term, the long haul, the exponential benefit of fathering, and they just dwell on functioning. Being a father requires a different skill set than being a good or great project manager. Our ceiling as leaders should become the floor of those that follow us. In other words, our greatest advantages and endeavors, our greatest achievements should be actually where our followers begin and start. Jesus said, "Greater works than these you shall do." Not only the works that I've done are you going to be able to do, but you're going to do even more works. It just kind of blows our minds as believers. We think those thoughts and we go, how could we do greater works than Jesus? And yet this is the principle. He was working to father us, lay down good principles by which we can live, the gospel, get us reconnected with Father. And in all of those great right environments and right principles, if we get them working in our lives, we should be able to go farther than Jesus did when he was on the planet. He only lived 33 and a half years as a man. We, like him, as men, living now in relationship with Father, relying on Father and Spirit, just like he was, we should be able to go farther than he did. Most leadership training, however, only focuses on being a better functional leader and not being a good fathering leader. I'll have many more things to say on fathering and functioning as we go on, and that's not particularly the specific target of our time today. So let me get to it. Sharing the spotlight. Now, there are two challenges to sharing the spotlight. One is the biggest challenge, in my view, is that most of us grow up with what I call an affirmation deficit. We grow up and not having enough put into us that would allow us to be comfortable and confident in ourselves, the kind of confidence in ourselves that would allow us to bring others along in our success, or at least do that consistently or very well. An affirmation deficit causes us to need all of the attention, all of the feedback, all of the accolades that we can gather to ourselves so that we can feel good enough about ourselves to keep going in our own leadership role. The second problem I find with sharing the spotlight is that a lot of leaders that I know, good leaders, focus almost entirely on the organizational results that we're after, right? We want our church to grow, and so we focus on training certain leaders to do certain things because we think that's what's going to cause our church to grow, and it probably will help. But what if your church grows and you don't have enough leaders to actually lead it? Because if your church grows, you're going to need more leaders than you have. And the only way to have more leaders is to actually not only put functional responsibility on the leaders you have, but put fathering responsibility on the leaders you have, right? See, a lot of good leaders that I know, good leaders have trouble sharing the spotlight. Great leaders not only invite those that they lead to share their spotlight, but they empower their followers to actually shine when they get in the light. That's powerful. So powerful. Listen to 1 Corinthians chapter 1 and verse 1. This letter is from Paul, chosen by the will of God to be an apostle of Jesus Christ. Ooh, spotlight, platform. Paul was chosen to be an apostle of Jesus Christ, and from our brother Sothsenes. It's from Paul and Sosthenes. My question to you is, who's Sosthenes? We don't know a lot about Sosthenes, but I would suggest to you Sosthenes was probably one of Paul's spiritual sons, or someone that was following Paul. Paul had a habit of promoting those that were following him. He promoted Timothy. Remember, Timothy followed him, and he set him up eventually to be the pastor and leader of the church of Ephesus. In a lot of Paul's letters, he would recommend those that he was sending, and he would recommend them as if he himself was coming to visit. See, Sosthenes was probably a follower, and yet Paul, the great apostle, had no trouble sharing the billing with Sosthenes right at the outset of his letter to the Corinthians. How many of us as leaders find it easy to share the spotlight? I want to share just a small example from my own life and how life-transforming that experience was for me. I remember about 20 years ago, I moved to a location where we are right now in Lexington, Kentucky. Had been leading as an associate pastor for 12 years, and we were in a transition in our lives. We moved to Kentucky to be underneath of another leader, Jim and Jeannie Davis to be exact, and they were planting a church. They invited us to move down to Lexington to help them plant a church. Long story short, he didn't know me very well. I didn't know him very well. I was the follower, he was the leader. And what you need to know about Jim is that he had a bit of a national ministry. He was the name, right? He was the president of a network of churches. He traveled 30 plus weeks a year over some 500-600 churches in the U.S. And so he was the name, he had the platform. I was coming as a follower. And I remember going with him on a trip. He invited me to go. We were on a 10-hour drive. He was invited to be part of an event at a church. And I was going along really to provide him company for the trip, number one, and number two, to carry his bags and to support him on his ministry trip. So it had nothing to do with me. It was all about him. But I remember he asked me a very strange question. I can't remember if it was on the way or after we got to the church. It was an overnight event. And I don't remember the exact timing of the question, but I remember the question. And it startled me, it challenged me, and it affirmed me. He said, "Do you have anything that you feel like the Lord is saying to this church?" Now, again, I wasn't the one invited. I wasn't the name. I didn't have the platform. He was all of those. I wasn't. And yet, as I was following him, he was modeling what a good leader is. In fact, a great leader. One who wasn't so insecure that he needed all of the billing for himself, all of the spotlight or the platform for himself. But he was willing to share that spotlight with me. And dear ones, while I can't tell you a thing that I said if I said anything at all, I can tell you that event, that question, that genuine invitation into his spotlight helped to fashion me and form me. I want to tell you that it is so valuable that you and I are given the responsibility to father sons and daughters, become a mentor to those who God has called to walk alongside of us. Just like Paul and Sosthenes, just like Paul and Timothy, just like Jim and me. My name happens to be Tim as well. God's given us the privilege of leading. And there are those that he's gathered to us. And the question is, are we willing to share our spotlight with them. Who are you leading? And who is ready to handle a little bit of your light? Would you be willing to share your light with them?